An unexpected crisis that's putting a strain on relations between key allies. What will the US do beyond an investigation it's announced for missing Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi? And how will Riyadh fend off the widespread outrage over allegations that the Saudi critic was killed on its orders? This is Inside Story. Welcome to the program. I'm Imran Khan. US senators have forced the government into joining the investigation into the disappearance of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. He was last seen entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul 9 days ago. Turkish security sources say he was murdered there by a Saudi hit squad. The Saudis deny that, as well as a Washington Post report which says the Saudi crown prince ordered an operation to lure the critic back home. We'll get to our guests very soon, but first, Patty Culhane reports from Washington.
What do you know at this point?
I know nothing right now. I know what everybody else does, nothing.
In just 24 hours, U.S. President Donald Trump went from no one knows what happened to Jamal Khashoggi to we need to find out.
We're demanding everything. We want to see what's going on here. That's a bad situation. It's a very serious situation for us and for this White House. We do not like seeing what's going on.
What is going on now will be the subject of an official investigation after 22 senators sent this letter to the White House invoking the Magnitsky Act. It gives the administration 4 months to determine if Khashoggi's human rights were violated, and if so, by law, they will have to place sanctions, potentially on people high up in the Saudi government. The outcry is bipartisan and growing.
If this man was murdered in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, that would cross every line of normality in the international community. If it did happen, they would be held to pay.
If Saudi Arabia took a U.S. resident, lured him into a consulate, and killed him, it's time for the United States to rethink our military, political, and economic relationship with Saudi Arabia.
The president has been eager to forge a relationship with the leadership of Saudi Arabia, heralding the tens of billions of dollars in defense deals. But with reports that many of those have not come through, the president will be under increasing pressure to target Saudi Arabia. He's not alone. Just about 6 months ago, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman toured America, meeting the most powerful people in the country, all now being urged on social media to condemn him. And for the president, it is about to get personal after Khashoggi's fiancée wrote this opinion piece in the Washington Post urging action. The president said he'll meet her at the White House soon. This was a day that saw the president speak out. Small public protests in Washington, D.C. and New York that drew a lot of media attention and angry senators demanding action. All signs that for Saudi Arabia, this is not going to go away anytime soon. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Let's bring in our guest. Joining us from Washington is Soner Cagaptay. He's the director of the Turkish research program with the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Here with me in the studio is Ibrahim Fraihat. He's an associate professor of conflict resolution at the Doha Institute. And finally, in Washington, in D.C., is Ali Ahmed. He's the director of the Gulf Affairs Institute and a former political prisoner of Saudi Arabia. Welcome to you all. I'd like to start with Soner first. Let's get into this Senate investigation that's been announced. What is it, and does it have any clout?
I think where it is heading is that in Turkey, the government, the security forces are slowly but steadily releasing information to build a case that Jamal Khashoggi may indeed have been murdered. And I think the Turkish president, that's Erdogan, has stayed out of this so far because, in my view, he's still trying to avoid a direct confrontation with Saudi Arabia. He's also trying to align U.S. position with the Turkish position. I think, of course, reports in international media suggesting and using Turkish evidence to build a case that Khashoggi may have been murdered is closely aligning Washington increasingly more with Turkish position. Turkey is isolated in the Middle East, with the exception of Qatar. It has no friends. It doesn't want to go into a long and drawn-out conflict with Saudi Arabia without having U.S. backing first.
But let me just say, if there's this much anger over what's happened, particularly in America through the media and within some parts of the U.S. government, how do they get out of this? I mean, is this a final roll call for the Crown Prince? Does he have to step aside?
That's hard to say, but I think that it's also not clear that Turkish President Erdogan and U.S. President Trump are completely getting along right now. You know that they're involved in a dispute over the arrest of a U.S. pastor in Turkey, Pastor Brunson. In fact, his court case is coming up tomorrow, and whether or not the courts release him and allow him to travel, of course, will have a significant impact on how U.S. President Trump views Turkish President Erdogan. The two cases are completely unrelated, but as it happens, I think that these two issues are now intertwined. So I think tomorrow you might see a more clear signal from the White House if Turkish courts make a decision that President Trump views favorable.
Let me just bring in Ibrahim Fraihat here. The regional implications of all of this. You have two very big players in the Middle East. You have Saudi Arabia, you have Turkey. What does Turkey do next if it is confirmed that he was murdered in the consulate? What options does it have?
Well, I agree with your guest from Washington, actually. President Erdogan does not have many options here. It's no easy options for him here. And he has obviously to do something, to take a decision regarding this, especially that if this is proved to be the case, that Jamal Khashoggi was in fact kidnapped and murdered in the consulate. So there is no way that, for him, in terms of credibility and positioning in the world, that to just take no action whatsoever. At the same time, the choices are with fighting or struggling with Saudi Arabia. It's not in his favor because with all the other issues that he has on his plate with Syria, Idlib, Russia, the United States, all of that. So I think at the end of the day, he will have to do something because if he doesn't, then it's about national pride, it's about dignity, it's about sovereignty of his country. So, and I think what he will have to do at this stage is that to ensure that he has an international backing, and I think that's why we're seeing the delays of him not taking actions yet.
Let me bring in Ahmed here. Let's just talk quickly about the case itself. Intelligence sources in Washington have told the Washington Post that they have evidence of a plot being created to capture Jamal Khashoggi. What is MBS thinking? Is he so close to the Trump administration that he thinks he can get away with almost anything?
That is in part true, and not only MBS, but other leaders, Saudi leaders. For many years, the U.S. has basically whitewashed Saudi leaders, called them reformers, and no matter how horrendous they do, in the case of Yemen, for example, just a couple of weeks ago, the State Department defended Saudi targeting of children, and in that past that 40 children were killed. So that's true. But here we might see a diversion a little bit. MBS, I think, is growing his own wings and maybe want to be independent. You can see what Mr. Trump have been saying in the past few days, basically publicly shaming King Salman and asking for money, that if you don't pay, you will not survive 2 weeks, and so on. So this is, I think, an indication of a silent confrontation, and the murder of Jamal Khashoggi gave the Trump administration and the Washington elites to increase the pressure. So this could be also related to something else that we don't know yet about. It could be about the deal with Israel, the so-called the deal of the century, because MBS has not delivered on many of his main promises that he's talked about. So this could be the real reason. In terms of Turkey, the Saudis are threatening or hinting that they will sever relations with the Turks. Issued a statement 2 days ago that the story or rumors of Saudi Arabia severing relations with Turkey are not true. But this is very suspicious because nobody was saying that. So they were trying to send a message. And the way the operation has been conducted, the two planes flew from Istanbul carried the kill team. One flew to Egypt and one flew to the UAE because Turkey is housing dissidents from the UAE, Muslim Brotherhood dissidents as well, and Saudi dissidents, Islamists mostly. So maybe you have here an alliance between Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Emirates against Turkey, and maybe 3 of them will sever relations. I expect that, in fact, because in 2
let me
days
just
we
bring
will
in
hear
Sona
Erdogan
Cagaptay
talking
here.
about this.
You
Case
just
of Jamal
mentioned, Ali
Khashoggi.
Al-Ahmed, about the fact that, trade between the US and Saudi Arabia is worth billions of dollars, $55 billion of arms sales alone in 2018. Sona, how do you reset that relationship after something like this? Does the money talk louder than politics?
It does, but this could be a major public diplomacy debacle for the Saudis as Turkey slowly releases evidence showing that indeed there may have been a plot to assassinate or kill Khashoggi. And I think that Turkey really maybe does not also want to go into a full confrontation with the Saudis. Erdogan is aware of his limitations. He's also deferential to the Saudi kings. He respects them as the protector of Islam's holiest mosques. In the past, for example, when Saudi kings visited Ankara, the Turkish capital, Erdogan, in violation of diplomatic protocol, went to visit them in their hotel room. This never happens in Ankara. Visiting heads of state go to Erdogan's residence or palace to visit him, and he did the opposite, so he shows respect to them, and I think he really does not want a rupture. In my view, one of the reasons why he has been completely absent and not blamed the Saudi royal family, but let his unnamed security officials do the job, is because not only he tries to avoid a confrontation with the Saudis, but also because he's trying to give them a graceful exit out. He was hoping that the royal family would issue a declaration and saying something like that the rogue elements of the Saudi state did this and they have nothing to do with it. But in the absence of such statements, I think he's now being forced to release more and more evidence, and that will only build a case in the U.S., starting with the U.S. Congress. There's already some talk of legislation for sanctions related to the suggested murder of Khashoggi, and this could also, of course, push the administration to take stronger measures. So I think we are not at an irreversible moment. I think Turkey is still hoping that the Saudis will take the graceful exit out. But if not, we could soon enter into a territory where we could see a rupture in Turkish-Saudi relations, and that will be the first time or the most severe crisis in recent memory, as far as I can recall, in Turkish-Saudi ties.
Let me bring in Ibrahim here. A graceful exit. That's what Sona Cagaptay just said. A graceful exit. We've not seen the Saudis handle this very well. The statements that they've issued have been, oh, the camera wasn't working, oh, we don't know where he is. It's almost like the dog ate my homework. It's excuses rather than any kind of concrete evidence that they're providing. Do you think they're handling it badly, and why is that?
Well, I think so far it has been handled very poorly on the Saudi side, because the whole reason that has been given so far that he left after 20 minutes and the cameras were not recording. And this is not convincing for anyone. And this actually what frustrated the American positions even further on this, because we are seeing many phone calls from Kushner, from Pompeo, and including from Trump himself, calling and asking for answers and for informations. But again and again, the only thing that we're hearing is that the cameras were not recording. I think this is not helping Saudi Arabia, and this is not helping the crisis at all, because also it's not helping Erdogan is to try to work out a solution on his end. It's not helping the United States either, because we are seeing that increasing pressure within the Senate House, including lately the 22 senators asking or requiring actually Trump is to launch an investigation under the Magnitsky human rights account. So for this reason, I think we are pushing, or the absence of a Saudi answer is pushing the crisis to new levels and new thresholds. Because let's keep in mind, in the United States, there has been already huge frustrations over how Saudi Arabia is handling Yemen, and why are we taking the liability of the Saudi handling of Yemen. And now it's not only Yemen, but also this issue of Jamal Khashoggi, which is frustrating the U.S. position.
Let me bring in Ali Al-Ahmed here. You were a political prisoner of Saudi Arabia. You understand the regime and the way it works. Because the kingdom is so used to restricting access to information domestically, do you think they were expecting anything like this? And do you think they have the tools to be able to deal with an international, not only just media crisis, but political crisis as well, when they're so used to restricting access to information?
I mean, they have good friends in the West, in Washington. They have dozens of PR and law firms that represent them. So they have been, I think, extremely successful. I mean, this is bad, but if it was done by another country, it would be even worse. So they do have allies here, and I think in a few days, next week, things will get better for them. Speaking about Turkey, my information is the president, Mr. Erdogan, will be speaking on this maybe Saturday, and the Turks have a video of the actual murder, and they will show it on TV. So, and I think I agree with your guest from the Washington Studio that there is an alliance growing between the Turks and the Americans regarding this issue, and maybe the Turks are taking advantage of that as well, because Jamal Khashoggi was close to the Erdogan administration. He was a strong defender of Turkey, but also he was liked by a certain people here in Washington, the Washington Post crowd. So I really think this is going to damage Saudi Arabia and Mohammed bin Salman, who I just heard last night, the Americans are shopping for a replacement. I cannot confirm these things yet, but I believe it because MBS has not delivered on his promises, and the Americans rather find somebody else.
So now let me bring you in here. Shopping for a replacement? Is the Americans so frustrated with the Crown Prince that they're actually looking to try and replace him, or at least influence his replacement?
This is definitely a time that is very difficult public diplomacy-wise for Saudi Arabia as the issue develops and evolves and more evidence comes out from Turkey. And if it's indeed the case that the Turks have a videotape of the murder, of course, then it can't be denied at that stage. It's going to be very difficult to hold the floodgates of an anti-Saudi backlash. I think that there's still some time, of course, maybe for a makeup. I think that's one reason why Turkish President Erdogan has remained absent from the debate. He hasn't blamed the Saudi authorities. Of course, he knows that the Saudis have financial instruments. Turkey's economy just went through a pretty severe shock. And so that could hurt and undermine Turkey.
But so let me just stop you there for a second.
Of course,
would ending the war in Yemen be a way out for both the Saudis and the US out of this crisis? Would that help?
I think
is there a chip at play here that we don't know about?
It would help on the public diplomacy side, but I think right now the Khashoggi incident outshines everything else. That nothing that the Saudis would do anywhere else, I think, would help cover it if indeed there was a murder. And I think that the Turkish side will insist, and that is because Turkey is very envious of its sovereignty. I think Erdogan rightly feels that Turkey's sovereignty has been violated. Turkey is a former imperial nation, as we all know. The Ottomans collapsed less than 100 years ago. So this is completely unacceptable, and I think, therefore, the Turkish side will insist on some sort of either a graceful exit that the Saudis take or complete pushback against the Saudis if it doesn't happen.
Ibrahim, let me bring you in here. Saudi dissidents abroad, they are increasing in number. In the last year alone, we've seen 20 people seek asylum in Canada, Saudi residents seeking asylum in Canada, because they're so afraid what the regime will do to them. Why do Saudi dissidents abroad present such a threat to the Saudi government?
Well, I don't think actually they present this serious threat to the Saudi government. I think it's the way the Saudi government is handling this issue. Many countries, actually, they have oppositions abroad, and they're working against them in different ways. I think it's a matter of like the level of political tolerance on those government side. So Khashoggi himself, I don't think he was even proposing himself to be an opposition. He said it many times on TV in many of his media interviews. I'm not opposition. I'm trying to advise, and actually we heard the reports that he was trying to promote some sort of a democratic reform, for the entire region. It's not only for Saudi Arabia. So that's the way the Saudi leadership is managing this opposition abroad issue is the different variable that we have here that is leading us to this crisis, which is, of course, is causing a serious crisis with their key ally. The number one ally is the United States, because this issue is going to complicate matters for the emerging alliances between Saudi Arabia and the United States, whether it's regarding the ultimate deal or regarding many other things. Because now we are seeing again within the American administration a split between the between the White House and the establishment, where Trump in the beginning was reluctant to intervene in this crisis, and the Senate House is pushing for action. So now here is another dilemma for the U.S. foreign policy, is between, I see it as between a struggle or a confrontation between commitment to human rights around the world and arms sales. Right, so it's not an easy trade-off.
It's
right?
money talking
it's
once
money
again.
talking, and that's why we're seeing Trump being reluctant. And he already actually made some sort of statements that we should not expect that the arms sales being affected. So traditionally in U.S. foreign policy, when values clash with interest, traditionally U.S. foreign policy favored interest, not values, not human rights, and that's why I don't think we should expect too much from the American position on this.
Well, let me bring Ali Ahmed here. We're going to talk about the dissidents, just again, the dissident movement that's abroad. What does something like that do to a movement that was already very scared of what the Saudi government could do? What does an incident like this do? Does it, in effect, kill that movement, or will people be too scared? Indeed, we tried to get a Saudi dissident living abroad onto the show today, and he turned us down because he felt he was afraid for what might happen. What does this do for the dissidents?
I think some, like the gentleman you spoke to, his brothers have been thrown in jail, and his friends and they were using him, and they did it against me. My brother has been in jail for the past basically 20 years. And they added my nephew to the mix. And so they use your family against you. I have been myself a target for surveillance, spying, infiltration, hacking, luring to another country, just like Jamal Khashoggi was lured. So they do not like dissidents, especially in key countries like the United States, especially people who provide an alternative, a sane alternative. If you were in Washington and you're talking about setting up like an Islamic something, nobody will, they wouldn't care, because the Saudis actually promote those kind of opponents, so they appear, to be the best option. But when you are talking about democracy, freedom for all, and so on, something similar to what we have in the West, that poses a danger. It's important for the Saudis to appear to be the most liberal option in the country. So if you are more liberal than them or more modern than them, then that proposes a problem. For
Ali, I'm just going to stop you there, because we are getting close to the end of the show. I want to bring in Sana here. Let's just talk about the idea that there has to be a way out of this crisis. We don't know what that way out is right now, but if you were advising the Trump administration, what would be your next move?
I think that the idea would be to cooperate with Turkey to carry out a thorough investigation and to look at the evidence that Turkey is providing, as well as adding U.S. investigators to this to get to the bottom of it. And I think that's the only way we can see a conclusion of this issue.
Ibrahim, just very, very quickly, the regional implications for all of this. We still don't fully understand what they're going to be. But do you think the longer this crisis goes on, the worse it will become for the region generally?
Well, of course, we have the sanctions against Iran, reaching at their peak in November. And the crisis is between this, alliance between the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia to confront Iran is going to get serious in November. So we're just there. So given if this crisis continues, I think this is going to mainly affect this what's called confrontation with Iran and how it's going to be handled, because especially again if the Senate House pressures the White House, Trump, even more to take actions, and because there is a human rights violations bluntly committed against journalists and which is violating international acceptable norms. I think it's going to complicate the whole thing, and it raises serious questions about the next steps for this regional alliance.
Serious questions indeed. I'd like to thank all our guests, Sana Cagaptay, Ibrahim Fraihat, Ali Al Ahmed, and thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, bye for now.